Hello and welcome back to the History of Video Gaming. My name is Ben and I'm joined with Wes. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ben. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I'm just like chilling. It's kind of been a nice relaxing weekend, so let's keep it that way. Why don't we get into it and talk about what you've been playing since last week?
Yeah, sure. So unfortunately, not too much different in the way of, I've been playing a lot of, I think I talked about it last episode, but Pokemon Black, the Gen 5 Pokemon game. Still been playing a ton of that because tomorrow Pokemon Go is going to release Gen 5.
Oh yeah, so, nice.
Gearing up, getting ready for that. And it's funny, just like the small, like 1 week of playing it makes me care about catching stuff like a little bit more. Like all the Gen 3 stuff, I was like, what the hell are these things? But now that I've played for a little bit, I'm like, oh yeah, I can't wait till that guy comes out to catch that. So yeah, just a lot of getting super nerdy about Pokemon. There was a Pokemon Go event that I was texting you about right before we recorded to catch a shiny Pokemon that was like spawning in higher rates and stuff like that.
Okay, did you get one?
I did not. No. It's all about those bragging rights, but usually lots of people have the ones that show up at the it's called community days, and they happen once a month, and for 3 hours it's usually like one of the starter Pokemon for each generation shows up and has a chance to be shiny, which means nothing but looks cool.
That's all right.
Wait, yeah, I mean that's the point. It's what were you gonna ask?
I was gonna say, like, if Generation 5's coming out, is it gonna be like harder to find them because now you've got a lot more Pokemon out there, or are they like gonna get a bonus for a while to catch?
For this week, they're definitely getting a bonus. Like They spawn more. I'm not sure how they balance it though, because I mean it's at the point now where like I just don't see Pidgeys and Weedles as much.
Really?
Because they used to just be like all over the freaking place. And I still see tons of Weedles because it's like they show up a lot in cloudy weather. It's always cloudy-ish, but but yeah. So I'm not sure because I mean it's getting to the point where there's going to be like, I don't know how many it is at Gen 5, but probably at least like 500 different things that can spawn.
Yeah.
So yeah,
there's a lot.
It'll be interesting. Now. Yeah, that's kind of the point, though. I mean, it's good when something's not super easy to find because then it makes it worth collecting, you know? So they figured that out after they released, I think, one of the early generations, like Gen 2. They just released everything at once, and people caught them all in like 2 days. So now they're like, okay, we're releasing like only 30 Pokemon from Gen 5, and then like a month or two later. It's a little weird because they don't release it all at once, but I get it because I feel like people would be like, where the hell's all my content if they just released 150 Pokemon for 1 day and then like didn't do anything for like 6 more months.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's weird because it is like, okay, now I have like 30 of these Pokemon, but where are the rest? But I get it. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, I'm pumped. Nothing I'm super excited about in the first wave of Gen 5 Pokemon, but it'll be pretty good.
Good.
Just doing that, and then watching WoW Classic while I'm playing Pokemon.
Yeah.
Because it's just watching somebody level. I like it as the background noise, but it is not super interesting. That's kind of why I like it. I mean, that's why it's WoW Classic. But what about you? What have you been playing recently?
Well, I've I don't know. I guess because like college football and stuff has started up, I've been in the mood to play some football. And you know me, I'm not like willing to pay EA for anything. So
right.
I've got an indie football game called Axis Football 2018 that I bought last year, and I've been playing that a bit. And it's pretty good. It's got like quite a bit of issues, but it's by an indie team, and it's only, I want to say, third release. So I don't know. It's pretty good, but I might not recommend it for someone who's expecting like a fully polished thing, you know?
Yeah, you don't get the polish when you're not buying from those huge AAA games, but
yeah. Like I was looking a lot at the 2019 version is going to come out in a couple weeks, and they've, did like a little dev blog on it and stuff. And like one of the new features is like adds a coin toss, and you're like, how is that not already in the game? But it's not. You don't really notice it though. But there's other things that you definitely do notice. Like one of the biggest things to me, and they haven't talked about this, so I don't think it's going to be in the new one, but there's literally like no cutscene cinematics or anything. It's kind of like if you score a touchdown, it's like next play, and nothing happens.
Oh, weird. Yeah, there's not even like the go down to the field kind of camera. At least the dude like walking around.
There's nothing like that. There's no taunting.
That sucks.
There's no replay system, which is a big one for me.
Huh.
Because I'm always like, how did that pass go through? And then I can't go to the replay.
You can't be mad at the game and watch the replay and then be like, all right, fine.
Yeah. But, the base gameplay is pretty good, and they have some amount of modding capabilities. So, like, people have put in all the college teams, all the NFL teams.
Oh,
so
sweet.
you can play all them with the updated rosters and stuff. So, like, it's got some things going on, but at this point, it's still... luckily, they're not full price releases, but...
That's good.
I'm still kind of on the fence if I'm going to get the new one, just because it seems like most of the changes they made have been in the franchise mode. And I don't really play that mode that much. I'm more just like skirmish or whatever.
Oh, you just do like matches? Yeah.
Yeah,
Games,
I'll do like my own tournaments. I mean, you know me.
Oh, yeah. You love to set up those brackets.
Yeah, I love the brackets. And with franchise mode that they completely overhauled this past year, they went into like scouting and like trading and the NFL draft and all this stuff. And I'm like, all that stuff doesn't sound that fun to me. I don't know.
Yeah, if it's not your kind of thing, I mean, those improvements aren't going to make that new one very interesting. So
probably the biggest improvement probably is they apparently doubled the size of the defensive playbook. And like, that's like, they probably already have 200 plays in there. So it's probably like a fairly decent thing. But I'm like, I don't know if I'll pay $30 for that.
Right, exactly. So that's weird. They can use all the names of the teams and all the players.
Well, they're mods. They're not allowed to. They're mods.
In the original game. Okay, yeah.
The original game, it's like, I don't know, the New York Penguins or something, some made up team.
I was going to say, if they're an indie team, like there's no way they could afford licensing for like Madden games have like all the rights to that, I'm sure.
But they have like custom editor, and they apparently work with modders so that on day one, modders have mods out there.
Okay, for all the actual teams.
Yeah. It is pretty... It seems like it shouldn't be a thing, but it's right there, like, pinned on the top of the Steam forums, so...
Weird, yeah.
I think that's part of their vision, though, to let people... I hope in the future they kind of expand it so that people get maybe, like, custom portraits or... I don't know, just can take it further. But,
yeah, because then you can do your own kind of weird stuff with it, and you're not stuck in like, just like, okay, this is like the NFL.
Yeah.
The actual teams, the actual players. So you can do some whatever kind of crazy stuff you want.
And, specifically when I say whatever you want, I really mean mascot mode. That's what I want.
Mascot mode is the best.
It is the best. And no game has had it since, I think, NCAA like 2012 or something. Like,
is that like the one that we were playing in college?
I think, yeah. It feels really weird to me that game, I don't know if that game specifically, but that NCAA game when it was around, like, I don't think there's been a better football game since. And that's like weird to me to think about. It's been like 5-6 years.
Yeah.
But Madden is like a piece of trash, and then all you've got are these indie games that are trying, but they're not there yet,
Right, yeah. I guess it depends what people are looking for, so maybe they're improving some other stuff that just like doesn't appeal to you, or I don't know. I haven't played any of them.
Franchise mode.
Maybe like franchise mode, exactly.
I don't know. I'm sure they said that in their little dev blog that next year they're not going to focus so much on franchise mode, and they'll move to more gameplay focused or customization focused changes. So maybe I should just wait another year, but I don't know. I kind of want to support them too.
Just play some Blood Bowl in the meantime.
Well, that's not real football, but I do like a good Blood Bowl game. No, I'll probably just go back and break out the old Xbox 360 or whatever.
I mean, that was so fun. Yeah. Part of it's just playing it in college with friends too, I'm sure. But,
but the other part is playing mascots. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some pretty good ones, and they had them all. It was amazing. All right, should we move into our special topic?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, so this week I took a look at a specific gaming company. I took a look at PMC Electronics. And do you remember these guys at all, Wes? I mean, we've talked about them a little bit, but they haven't been like the heavy hitters.
Yeah, I can't remember like a game off the top of my head that they made.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me take you through their history real quick, because we've basically covered all the games that they have made and will ever make. So, I know. Well, I kind of don't. There's not many times when we bring up a company and they're still going strong at the end.
Right, yeah. Especially if it's something that we've never heard of before starting this podcast.
Yeah. I will say this, though. There was not a fire involved, so that's good.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so real quick, we kind of first talked about them when they came out with TV Table Tennis in 73. That was just a Pong clone. It was one of many Pong clones to come out in early 73. And then their first real kind of noticeable one, I would say, is Wham Bam. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, I was actually just scrolling through the timeline and saw that one.
Yeah, Wham Bam. It's a split color game, and I believe it was true color, although it maybe used overlays, I'm not positive. But basically one side I think was blue and one side was green. So, but another Pong clone, but at least they were doing some interesting things with color. And then they also had Player's Choice, which is a Pong clone where you could catch the ball and hold it for a second. And then Wham Bam 2 came out, also in 74. That was just a Pong doubles version of Wham Bam. And then the last one in 74 was One-on-One. And this was probably the most interesting game I think that they ever made, because I think it was we didn't have a lot of info on this one. I think it was just a flyer, but I think it was kind of like a Pong clone with some basketball Taito vibes. So it's kind of like a basketball themed Pong clone, but you could grab the ball and hold it and then kind of move your paddle up towards the top and then shoot the ball out in that direction.
Okay.
Which I think sounds like a pretty interesting Pong clone, but we couldn't find any real info on that one, so we couldn't play it. And then the last 2 or 3 that they made were the Aztec and Inca cocktail tables, which was just hockey by Ramtech, essentially. And the Princess cocktail table, which did have an interesting thing where you could play a 2v2 match with only 3 people, and the AI would cover one of the paddles. So they had some rudimentary AI. Yeah. But then, I don't know, they were never that big. They were originally established in 1965, and I think just made electronic parts for computers and stuff.
Right.
But they were located in Philly, PA, and then moved to Southampton, PA, kind of close to where we are. And in 76, they were sued by another Pennsylvania manufacturer named Electromotion, who we've talked about a little bit too. And maybe we'll go into them some other time, but they were sued by them, and I don't know what the results were of the suit, but certainly by the end of 76, they weren't around anymore. So
wow.
Yeah, I don't know if that put the nail in the coffin, or if they were we probably owe these guys a lot of money, let's just dissolve and not pay them, I don't know. And that was the end. And I was wow, that's kind of, I don't know, when I think of PMC Electronics, I feel there's more games than that, but that's all that there was, Maybe
was it just the gaming arm that went out of business, or did the whole company at that point?
I believe the whole company, but I'm not positive. There's not a whole lot of info on this company, to be honest. It doesn't help that their name is pretty generic and has been used by multiple different companies.
Right, yeah.
But they certainly didn't make any video games after that. They did make a couple arcade machine games, electromechanical games, but I don't know. I don't think they ever really got into that business either. And by the end of 76, I don't think they made any more of those games either. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just I have good memories of Wham Bam and the Aztec kit table and One-on-One and Player's Choice. I don't think any of them were particularly bad or anything, but I think it's just one of those cases where the manufacturer just wasn't, never really got big, and they probably had a lot of overhead and a lot of costs, and they just couldn't break through like some of these other companies have.
Right. And even if some of their cabinets were pretty decent or had some interest to them, if they didn't do great compared to the other Pong-ish type games that were coming out at the time, I'm sure they didn't really make much profit.
Yeah, I mean, the market was just so saturated that I just feel like they really had to do something unique, and they had the color, they had the holding the ball, But that's really all they had. And their last couple games, I think, were particularly pretty poor, in the Aztec and Inca cocktail tables. So, I don't know. I feel like they had some talent there, but they just never could capitalize. So, yeah, that's just a little
Just
bit
when we
of
thought
background.
Philly was going to represent with some PA video games.
I don't know about that. But yeah, I think, it seems like most of the big companies are either in California or Japan at this time, I would say.
Yeah, mostly.
Well, actually, isn't Meadows Games in Pennsylvania? I should look that up. They're like my
I
new
thought
favorites.
Meadows was California, but I could be wrong.
Maybe it is.
We'll have to double check on that one. But
yeah, they're like my new favorite right now. I'll definitely be talking about them a bit today.
Nice, awesome.
Yeah, but why don't we move into it? Because we got quite a lot of games we got to go over today.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the timeline.
All right, and welcome back. And let's get straight into the timeline, starting off with another console that was released in 1975. So this console was the Video Action 2 and the Video Action 2C, which I think stood for coin operated. And these were both released in 75 by Universal Research Labs, URL. And they had previously worked with Allied Leisure to help them make some of their cabinets, and they also made a cabinet of their own earlier. So they had a lot of experience making the circuit boards for these arcade games. But apparently after the Allied Leisure fire, they just kind of had a lot of stuff and nobody to help produce anything with it. Yeah, so they kind of decided, all right, let's go into making our own stuff. And they made both another sort of console that could be used for bars that had the coin box so that people could pay to play it, and a TV that came with it, and then another one, the Video Action 2, that was for home use with whatever TV set you had at home. And this one came with a large coax cable so that you could plug it in. And apparently it could be plugged into a color TV too, but I wasn't able to find out what colors were actually displayed on the screen when you did plug it in. And while they were selling this, the arcade version reportedly did a bit better because people could actually make money off it. But the home version was so expensive that it didn't really sell very well. It was $500 at the time, reportedly, which if you go and plug that into an inflation calculator for what it would be in today's dollars is $2,300.
Whoa.
So yeah, when you compare that to paying like $300 for a Switch or something like that, and you're paying $2,300 for the 3 Pong games, basically, although there's a little bit more to it than that. But the box itself was, both of these versions, the VA2C and the VA2, were the same thing, except one had the coin-operated functionality. But they were both just a kind of square console, sort of looked like a VCR, that had a flat front on it with a game selector for the 3 different games that it had, and also a way to adjust the ball speed and the volume. So I'm assuming the volume came out of the console itself on this one. And also on the top of it, it had 4 dials, which were the only controls, and each player could use a dial because this supported up to 4 different players. And the 3 games that came on both of these models were tennis, which is pretty simple, just your Pong-type game with either 2 or 4 players, and hockey, which is similar to some of the other hockey ones we've seen, except this one had actual goals that looked like hockey nets that were much closer to the center of the screen. So it didn't cover the whole screen distance like sometimes we see with hockey clones. And as far as I know, this one was also able to be played 2-player. It would just be 2 teams with 2 paddles in the net on, or 4 players, sorry, 2 teams with 2 paddles in the net on either side. And the last game that was available to be played on this was soccer, which was similar to tennis, but there was multiple paddles for each player. And again, with this one, I couldn't tell for sure, but I think you could also do 4 players on this one, probably just each player controlling 2 paddles on either side at the same time. And it kind of reminded me of like a video game version of foosball, which would be pretty cool. And I could see if you felt like paying $2,000, maybe having fun with that on your home console.
Or just buying a real foosball table. I don't know.
Exactly, which probably you could also get, I don't know at the time, but a nice one for $2,000. And one nice thing about this system is all the games had scores on the screen, which is always a huge thing, and on home systems is never a guarantee at this time. And another thing that I like that they pointed out on this flyer is that it had remote play, which as far as I could tell just meant if you had a long enough coax cable, you could plug it into the TV and then sit somewhere else, which I guess is remote play. And I could be wrong, but as far as I could tell, that's pretty much what it was. That's about it for the video action system. Nothing too new or crazy to it. It was just black and white graphics, but another new console coming out from a different company in 75.
Yeah, pretty cool one. I like that it had score. I kind of missed that. But that's a pretty big feature.
Yeah, and it was just I think it was with both the Video Master and the Odyssey 200 that they still had the little console with the physical dial or the slide that you moved up. So nice for a home console to have it. Yeah,
for sure. Although you had to pay for it for sure.
yeah, you're really shelling out for that score on the screen.
But let's move on. We're going to jump right into the first game that I reviewed in full today, called Anti-Aircraft by Atari. And people also call this Anti-Aircraft 2, but they're the same game. So I think the 2 was just like, it was trying to say there's 2 player capabilities, but it's not the second one. Like, people get that a little confused, but it's the same thing. This was released June 6th in 1965, or 75 rather. This is a timing game where planes would fly across the screen and you'd have to shoot them down based on these little turrets that were in the corners, and you played as one of the turrets. And each turret has like a kind of vertical position where it can fire. If a plane's right in front of you, there's like a 45-degree angle one, and then like a very almost horizontal one in case it's way towards the other side of the screen. And basically your goal was to shoot down as many planes as you can, and if you played 2-player, it would just be shooting more than your opponent. This one kind of really reminded me a lot of Drop Zone 4, which is the Meadows Games one.
Almost the opposite.
It is, yeah, because on that one you are in the plane shooting down below, and this one you're shooting up at planes. But and there's a lot of like weird similarities too. Let's go right into the ratings, because I feel like that'll, as I explain the game further, it's really connected to the ratings and how I compared them with Drop Zone 4. So let's do graphics first. So just like with Drop Zone 4, the airplane model of this looked like really nice. I don't know what's with it, but people in airplanes, but they can do pretty good airplanes. And just like with Drop Zone 4, at the very bottom, Drop Zone 4 has had these like blocky rectangle things. And this one, the cannons are just a square and then like a rectangle, and that's it. They look crap. I mean, I really don't understand how the planes can look so good and the turrets can look so bad, but they do. And I don't know. I ended up giving the graphics 2 out of 10. I do like the airplane models, but the thing is, there's no true color on this one, where there was with Drop Zone 4. You had that really nice skyline. On this, it's just black and white, and that's all you get. So, I don't know. You do get more planes on the screen at any one time, because I think they can come in at least 2 planes at a time, and they can come in from both sides. But I don't think that was really enough for me to really bump up the graphics score anymore. And something else with the graphics, you were able, since it was 2-player, which was a big improvement, I think, because having a 1-player game like this isn't as fun. So I kind of went into the gameplay side, but with 2-player and 2 ships on the screen, 2 cannons, you think like with all that more going on, it'd be like better to look at, but I just think that the cannon models are so bad, and the fact that it's black and white, I couldn't get it any more higher than that. And so going into the gameplay, I also gave that 2 out of 10. I kept going back and forth because I don't know, I feel like maybe I'm being too hard on this game, but it's just because I just reviewed Drop Zone 4 and I think that game's better.
Right, yeah.
But, to be fair, we're doing this chronologically. So this is what people at the time also had. They were like, wait, didn't I just play this? But yeah, so gameplay. The thing about the gameplay is, even though it's more fun with 2-player, and that's awesome, the cannon, it had its 3 positions, but it wouldn't update to the next position model unless you fired. So if you were in the very top position and you wanted to go 45 degree, you couldn't like turn it and then see, oh, is that at the right angle I'm thinking it is, or no? You had to just like fire and then it would move. And it was like,
that's so strange.
I know, it's like, well, it's already passed, or like if I thought it was going to be at a slightly different angle, I don't know until I've already guessed, Which
right.
means you feel like you're shooting blind, like a lot.
Yeah, just having no visual cue of, okay, the cannon's facing this way. Like before you even shoot, you just, that's super weird.
I know, and what made it worse and to play was similar to a lot of these games. Actually, you can only have 1 bullet on the screen per person.
Right.
So I would often fire a shot and think, oh, that's going to be off, and then I spam my click like to the next angle or whatever, and nothing would happen. You just like sitting there, and then it might be like just a hair late after that bullet had finally exploded or whatever, and then you move and you're off again. You're like, oh, just completely screwed that. It just felt very unresponsive to play. Whereas with Drop Zone 4, you only have 1 bullet at a time, but because you have to like aim it so carefully, you never fire want to fire 2 right in a row anyway. You're kind of always just like watching to see where the last one went, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to time the next one again. But because the angles of this one you can't see ahead of time, a lot of times it's like, he's over on the right, just go,
Right.
And it doesn't work out. So I do think if you memorize the angles of the cannon, you could get pretty good. And I was feeling like I was kind of getting there towards the end of my play, but the beginning user experience was just not good in this. And moving on to sound, we'll definitely play a sound clip of this right now. So with the sound in this one, it's got a lot more going on than Drop Zone 4, which had just a very basic explosion sound. But the sounds in this one are like annoying. Like, I don't know. There's just like, there's more going on. There's more explosions. There's more background sounds and firing sounds. But some of them are like really high pitched and kind of annoying. And I was like, there was definitely improvements there as terms of what it could do. But the actual sound effect I didn't think sounded good. So I just gave it 2 out of 10, which I think is the same as Drop Zone 4, but I'm not sure. And then for relevance, I gave it 3.5 out of 10. This is like, I don't think it really, did that much in terms of video gaming history, but it is another game by Atari, and I think it sold okay. So I wanted to give it some points there. But then for my overall score, I just gave it a 2 out of 10. And I feel kind of bad because part of me feels like this game is very similar to Drop Zone 4, and maybe I'm just being a little hard on it, but I just feel like Atari's got to like do better. Like, I don't know. Like the models weren't that good. There's no color. There's like the sound didn't sound that good. There's like problems with the gameplay. I don't know.
Yeah, just doesn't seem super polished. Where even if Drop Zone is fairly simple, some of the things that it does pretty well.
Graphically it looked better, and I don't know, because the gameplay with like Drop Zone 4, if you did really well, the plane would get faster, and you basically get to the point where you can't really play anymore. And you don't have that problem with this game, and you're having it be 2-player I think is a great improvement. Having more airplanes on the screen I think is awesome, but for every like good thing that they added, there was something bad that was also added. So I don't know. I didn't love it, I'll say. But it was definitely an interesting one to rate, because the whole time I was playing this, I was just comparing it to Drop Zone 4 in my head.
Right,
and, I don't know. if you have the decision to play either one, I think definitely Drop Zone 4. I think the graphics alone are worth it. But it's a weirder one, I would say. Another game by Atari that I think is a little bit outside of what they have been doing, and I like that, but they just didn't really do it very well in this case.
Right. Well, we are seeing so many things come out from Atari at this time frame. You got to think. I mean, they're already getting to be pretty successful, so they can pump out a lot of games, but that's probably got to be helping their odds. They throw out a game like this, which I don't know how it was critically or commercially received at the time, but say it doesn't do well, they might release another one in a month, as I'm looking on the timeline. But
well, it's also interesting because Drop Zone 4 came out in June. This came out June 6th. So I don't even know 100% that Drop Zone 4 came out before Anti-Aircraft. But
right.
I think for sure that these games were probably developed independently of one another. I'm almost 100% on that. And so if you're in Atari's position during development, you're probably like, oh, this is a brand new, airplane shooting kind of game. And then it just so happens somebody else had a very similar idea and did it better. And now you get punished,
Right.
But in a world where Drop Zone 4 doesn't exist, this might be a really cool, interesting game at the time. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. But I certainly think it didn't make as big of an impact as it could have, I think. If just a couple of small things could have been adjusted.
Mm.
So yeah, Anti-Aircraft / Anti-Aircraft 2.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It gave me some nostalgia, but kind of in not as good a way. I don't know.
That's fair. I mean, whatever it is, sometimes you can't explain exactly, but just doesn't gel with you, and you're like, not too sure about this one.
Yeah. So why don't we move on to your next one, Wes?
Yeah, absolutely. And in a similar way, not to frame this whole review that's about to happen in a negative light, but I'm not a huge fan of this, I gotta say.
Oh, really? I thought maybe this one, because it had elements of one that you did like.
Well, yeah, so I'll just get into it, because there are definitely parts I like about it. This one's called Knockout, and it's by Digital Games Incorporated, DGI, and it came out sometime in 75. And it was a cocktail table game marketed as a exciting, fast action game.
Oh.
And something else I thought was interesting on the flyer is that they specifically pointed out that the 19-inch monitor was solid state. And I'm not sure if that was just something of the time where they were marketing everything as solid state, or if maybe a bunch of things with monitors with moving components were breaking on cocktail tables because of people kicking them. I mean, that's just the story I'm making up in my head, but it'd be funny if that's why they started marketing things as like, hey, look, we made it solid state, so if it falls over, your monitor doesn't break or something like that.
I've definitely seen other arcade games market themselves as solid state, but I've never really figured out what they really meant by it. But
yeah,
that makes sense.
Well, it should mean that there's no moving components in it, yeah, but it also could just be that was the technology that came out at the time, so everyone's like, hey, look, it's solid state. But
yeah,
I like the idea that if someone was moving it when it had moving parts in it and the monitor would just break during play, they were like, hey, look, we got a solution for that.
Well, maybe they just wanted to say that because a lot of these companies were also making like electromechanical games that probably did have moving parts, so maybe it's just one way to distinguish that,
differentiate.
This isn't a pinball machine, whatever. Another way of saying that, maybe.
You can move it during play and it probably won't break it. But getting into the gameplay of this one specifically, I didn't get to play a version of this, but I did look up a decent bit on it and got to see a video of somebody playing it. It was a ball and paddle type game, sort of Pong style, but it had a different objective. The ball could bounce off of all the sides of the screen, so you didn't get a point by hitting it into your opponent's side. And there were these little markers on either side, I think pegs is what people usually call them, that you had to hit the ball into to make it disappear, sort of clean sweep style, except this one could be multiplayer. And the pegs, it was nice that for both teams, they were different shapes. They were empty squares for one team and crosses for the other team. And there was 3 different modes that you could play, either one player, and you just had to hit the ball onto the other side of the screen where the pegs were all lined up vertically and try to get as many as you could before the ball bounced and hit the ones that were behind your paddle. So you were kind of playing defense on yours while trying to hit it back and forth. And this mode was a little bit different because it also had vertical obstacles, like small little vertical dashes in front of the pegs on the opposite side to make it a little bit harder for you to just ricochet it straight and clear all that side easily. And then there was also a 2-player side, which was the same thing, except instead of the vertical dashes on the opposite side, there was another player. So you were hitting the ball back and forth at each other and trying to clear all the pegs off. And then the 4-player version, it was the same as 2-player, except you had 2 paddles on each side and you were playing as a team. So there's a lot of, it was cool that this one had so many options for how you could play it and variations on the same game mode that kind of make it a little bit different, and your objective changes a little bit when you have more players. And just another visual note, there was also 2 dotted lines going down the center of the screen that I assume were kind of marking the net. And it also looks like on the idle screen, the ball would just bounce up and down in between these 2 vertical dashed lines. So getting into my ratings for it, talking about all the description of it, I feel like my ratings might be a little harsh because it is an interesting game, but for graphics, I just gave it a 1 out of 10. It's plain screen with no color, just I believe it was a white background with black graphics on it. And there were just some different shapes and paddles. And I did think it was nice that they had the squares and plus signs for the different pegs that you had to hit. But compared to some of the other stuff that we're seeing now and some of the other innovations in 75, it just didn't seem like that was like a huge graphical achievement for a game at the time. So, and other than that, that's kind of all there was going on. Although I would say that the motion looked pretty good on this, where some of the older Pong style games, it looked a little jittery and you could kind of see the refresh rate a little bit easier. And for sound, I gave it a 1 out of 10 because it's just Pong noises, unfortunately. There's they happen at different times now because it can bounce off of all 4 walls and it makes the bounce noise. And also there's buzzes whenever you clear out one of those pegs, but it sounded like basically the same sounds. The gameplay, though, I did give it a 2.5 out of 10. I think the different objective is like an example of one of the Pong or ball and paddle games that we've played that takes a variation and makes it something different that's not just soccer, hockey, tennis. You're not just scoring against the other person. You're actually having to get rid of all these things on the screen and taking the single player clean sweep style and making it into a multiplayer game too. So it did seem like it would be pretty fun to play, but I just don't know if there's really too much more fun you could have with it after playing it for a while and with some of the other stuff that was coming out at the time. For relevance, I gave it a 2 out of 10. While I do like the new objective, I don't really think it had that much innovation over things we've already seen, like Clean Sweep. And I think that having those 1-player, 2-player, and 4-player options is pretty good, but not really enough to carry the game to being super relevant and something that would impact a lot of games in the future. So overall, I just gave it a 2 out of 10. There's a lot of ball and paddle games coming out, and this one at least changes it up so that it's a pretty fun game. And I really like that 4 players can play at the same time. But overall, it's not really that different from a tennis or a tennis doubles type game. It's just you can bounce the ball a little bit longer and you get points a different way. So yeah, that's my knockout rant, basically. I shouldn't have said that to lead off because I actually do think it's a pretty cool game, but I don't know, just some things missing, I think, to make it like a super interesting or a super notable game.
Right. And I think you made a good point when you're talking about those graphics and you're like, well, compared to what's going on outside of this. And that's a good point because I think by now we're like halfway through 75. We are kind of through with the Pong clones. We're like, if this isn't amazing,
right?
I'm over it, you know? And I bet so that's like how a lot of people felt.
Yeah. If this came out in like 73, I think it would have been like super awesome. And like that was the time when we were reviewing games and we were like, there's 4 shapes on screen. This is incredible.
Exactly. Yeah.
The squares and crosses or plus signs would have been pretty crazy. But for now, it's just kind of like sort of expected, or like you see a lot of stuff with stuff like that at 75.
Yeah, we're just expecting a little bit more, I think, for the better games of this year.
Yeah, which is good. It's impossible to rate any of these games totally isolated from the environment that it's in, and also it doesn't really make sense to not look at it in the context of what year it came out.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the whole point of us reviewing them chronologically, because we know everything that came out beforehand. So, if this game isn't as good as Clean Sweep, then what's the point? We can just play Clean Sweep. So yeah, I wanted to give it to you because I wanted to see how those Clean Sweep elements impacted the Pong, style gameplay, but it seems like it didn't make that big of an impact. Although I am very curious, did you see what does endgame look like? Because you're probably just guarding a single peg, right? That's got to be a little bit of a different experience than trying to guard the whole screen that you would normally.
Yeah, that's true. So it could create some unique gameplay. I don't know if that would end up being super frustrating or kind of like luck based on bounces, but depending on where that one peg left is too, the whole game would either shift to like the top of the screen and somebody trying to bounce it under your paddle, or if you're in the middle, you'd kind of still be playing the whole screen. So I didn't think about that too much because I didn't see an example of it, but that would be pretty interesting how that affected the gameplay.
Yeah, because I bet it would get kind of hard to finish someone off because the pegs aren't that big. It's probably the size of a paddle, right?
Yeah, or a little bit smaller even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and especially in the 4-player mode, I feel like it might be hard to even get a score if either team is like pretty good. Like, because the paddles, they can move, and if you're only covering half the screen, you can cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so I mean, it had a couple interesting things, but like you mentioned, I probably just not enough for the time to really stand out.
Yeah. I think it does do some interesting stuff, but I don't know, maybe not enough.
I also think it's kind of weird now that we've played a fair amount of color games. I feel like I'm kind of like a little bit, it doesn't have color, we'll move that graphic score down, like we're in that weird kind of middle area where it's only in a couple games, but
it's not super
every
popular,
month we're seeing more and more, so
yeah, we know that people can do it, whether the company who made the specific game can or not. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's Knockout. It was an interesting one. But let's move on to some of the honorable mentions that we have for this episode. The first one up, it's by Nintendo, and I assume it's pronounced Ever Race. It came out in 75. I mean, it's EVR, so I'm assuming Ever Race. It's an electromechanical video game hybrid. It looked like it was a horse betting simulator or simulation, but there wasn't really much gameplay going on.
Yeah. And moving on to the next honorable mentions, we've got Lunar Module by International Consolidated Industries, which that name just sounds like something out of like a comic book where they try to make up a name.
Yeah, really. Like these guys are just making like chemicals and polymers in the back, and they're like, hey, look, a video game. Like, what is...
Yeah, I don't know. But this was a kind of interesting one, though. It was a Pong clone where there's 2 balls on the screen, and we only had a flyer for this, so I don't know exactly what the other ball looked like, but one of the balls was real, and the other one would just go right through everything and was just there to confuse you. So
weird.
It was called a phantom ball, the other one. So it had a normal ball and a phantom ball just running around, which I think it actually could be kind of fun. Again, not that interesting. We couldn't find much info on that one, so we obviously couldn't play it or rate it. And then moving on, we've got Goal 4 by Atari. This came out July 16th of 1975. And it's a Pong clone where the goals could be moved, or the goals would be moving, during a game. So it's kind of like hockey, but instead of the goals always being in the middle, they kind of like randomly move up and down. Oh, and weird. Then the other interesting thing about this is you had a knob, kind of like the English knob, but it only would impact it right when you hit the ball. So you could have it so that, I'm going to turn that knob like straight up. And then if the ball hit your paddle, it would just, deflect straight up. So you kind of controlled the arc of how you hit the ball with a knob, and it wasn't so much physics-based where it depended on what angle it came in at and stuff.
Right.
So that was kind of an interesting, might make it a little bit more, talent-driven of a game, I thought. definitely be hard to use that knob. And then
I'm sure, yeah.
we couldn't find emulation for that one either, or a video. So the last one I've got here is Combat by Bertolino, which is a great name. I think they got to be Italian. I don't know.
I'm assuming, yeah.
It's some sort of shooting game where I think you had to shoot down airplanes again. But this one, it was kind of interesting because depending on where you hit the airplane, if you hit it in like the nose or the middle or the tail, you got different points for that. So you were rewarded for hitting the airplane as soon as you could or as late as you could or whatever. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, we didn't have any more info on that other than I think a flyer and like a description. So just left it an honorable mention.
And next up we have Slam and Slam 2 by Micro, which came out in August of 75. And these were Odyssey tennis clones, basically, with a button that let you slam the ball into the opponent, which we're guessing was sort of like a spike in volleyball-type games. And next up, we had Wheels 2 by Midway, also in August of 75. And this was just a two-player version of Speed Race and Wheels. It was made by Taito, but released through Midway earlier than Taito's actual version of this game. And then we have Speed Race Deluxe, Speed Race DX, and Speed Race DLX, which I think are just all the different titles for Deluxe, right?
Yeah, I think it's just renames or something.
Yeah, and this was by Taito Games in August of 75. And this was basically Speed Race, but it added a gear shift and a timer to it.
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting. When we first talked about Wheels 2, and it was like released earlier than Taito's, I had to remind myself that the last like Speed Race type game that did have two-player was actually by Allied Leisure, Street Burners. So I was like, wait a minute, that wasn't Taito? Oh no.
That's right, yeah, because it's weird that we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, from them. Somebody actually didn't Allied Leisure do that with they did that with Pong too. They came out with Pong doubles first. Or, before Pong doubles, they came out with I forget what it was, Paddle Battle or something.
Paddle Battle sounds about right, yeah.
But moving on, we're going into the Odyssey 200, and I wanted to be nice to Wes, and so I took this one. Since you did the Odyssey 100.
Mm-hmm.
But the Odyssey 200 it's a little better. It's not that much better. So basically, you still had your tennis and your hockey, which was just like the Odyssey 100, and it was still, forward directional using the English control because you had to have the English control in there. But this one did have something kind of new. It had a new game called Smash, which was basically a handball type game. But that one had a version of on-screen scoring where you had like a little line at the bottom of the screen for both players, and every time you got a point, the line would kind of move ahead a little bit. And so whenever the line got to all the way at the far right side of the screen, that person would win. So it was like a version of it.
I mean, that's on-screen scoring in an Odyssey console, which I feel like is unheard of.
I know. So, and I should say it only worked for Smash. The other two games still didn't have it for some reason.
Okay.
So, yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. It's definitely not as nice as just seeing the numbers up there. I'll say that, but it is better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that it had a doubles option, and a lot of people mistake this as it being like 4-player compatible because there's 4 paddles, but there's still only 2 sets of controls. So it's still 2-player, but what would happen is each person would have another paddle that would kind of like follow their paddle in a way where it was a little bit delayed. So you could use it to kind of increase your odds of hitting something by moving, and then the other one would kind of follow you slowly so you can kind of protect 2 parts of the screen at once. But it wasn't a true 4-person Pong doubles type game. It was more singles with like this kind of floaty paddle that kind of helped you out. And I believe that doubles option, it was definitely in tennis and hockey. I think it was also in Smash, but I'm not positive about that. The console also had basic sound effects, basically the same as Odyssey 100, and I think it used a new chipset. I think that's the main reason why the console was released by Texas Instruments again. The console itself looks very similar to the Odyssey 100, except I think it looks a little bit more sleek. It's white instead of like this weird red color that you had.
Right, yeah, that orangish red.
Yeah, and it looked about the same. Still had your 3 knobs, which again, how do you turn 3 knobs that are in like a diagonal with one hand?
Yeah.
Or even 2 hands.
Very strange.
Yeah. So it's still probably a little bit weird to control. So I don't know. I kind of wanted to base my ratings a little bit off of yours because I think it's very, very similar with just very slight things that it added. So for gameplay, I decided to give it a 2.5 out of 10 just because it did feature a third game. It did feature that doubles option, and it did have some basic scorekeeping in the Smash version. So, and I would say of all these games, the Smash version is probably the one that's the least fun to play. So to have the scorekeeping in that, it's probably pretty good. For sound, I kept it at a 2 out of 10 just because I think they didn't add anything with the sound. It's the exact same as the Odyssey 100.
Right.
For graphics, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10, like just a little bit of a bump just because you did have that scorekeeping as a visual component to the game. And you also, I don't know, just having the doubles option with the more paddles, it does impact the graphic display a little bit. It makes it feel a little bit more advanced in some way. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally for relevance, I give it a 3 out of 10. I think it's interesting because it's the first Odyssey console to have some type of on-screen scorekeeping, and it's also the first one to have a doubles option, even though it wasn't a true doubles option. It was the first time I think that we've ever seen the Odyssey console have more than 2 movable lines and a ball at one time. You're right. So I thought that was nice. I don't think they really changed that much, but I think like if you didn't buy the Odyssey 100, you definitely want to buy this one. Like you wouldn't want to buy the Odyssey 100 at that point. So I don't know if you had the 100 though. I don't know if I would have bought the new one, but because I imagine we couldn't get a price for this, but I imagine it was probably fairly expensive. Probably around, I don't know, $200 or $300 at least in there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I thought I remembered seeing something around 200 or 300. This one was probably a little more expensive than the 100.
Mm-hmm.
But I know the Ralph Baer this was kind of his attempt to say, what if I made a cheaper version than the original Magnavox Odyssey?
Right.
So it was probably still expensive, but maybe a little cheaper than some of the other systems.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't the video action price. So I'm pretty sure about that one anyway. I like seeing the Odyssey return. I have hopes for them still. But they didn't really do that much for the 200, I don't think. So just a couple little things. Having a third game, definitely worth it, because just like with the 100 and also with the video action and the Video Master Rally that we talked about last time, all these consoles, these are all the games that will ever be released on them because they don't have cartridges at this point. They're just whatever comes with it. So
right. If
you're going to buy, spend a couple $100 and buy a console, even just having one more game is probably pretty good. So, and the fact that Odyssey 100 only had 2 games is still kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, that's nuts.
But yeah, that was Odyssey 200. I think I mentioned everything. It had boundaries top and bottom and on both sides in certain game modes, so that's good. You can't fly off the screen. I don't know. I didn't see if you could go to the other person's side of the screen still, but I think you could.
Yeah, I forget. Yeah. And it is interesting with this one because when I was doing my research initially for the Odyssey 100, it basically sounded like I think they had their agreement with Texas Instruments and they're like, oh, this new chip they're making is going to be awesome. But either it didn't release soon enough, so they made the 100 that tied them over, or they made the 100 and then found out the new chip was going to release. So then they're like, oh, shoot, now we have to make something with this better technology.
Yeah.
Because they came out like pretty quickly after one another.
Yeah, we didn't have exact dates, but they both were in 75. And just based upon the consoles that are going to be coming out, like I put in the timeline after this, I thought this one wasn't too late in 75. Like it didn't have that many features to make me think, oh yeah, it's definitely has to be really late,
Right.
So I ended up putting it kind of in between August and September here of 75 for the 200, which I think is probably about where it was.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So why don't we move on for that and get our last couple games in here? I feel like we move kind of fast today, Wes. We're flying through.
We got some good stuff to cover and excited to talk about it. Odyssey 200 always gets people going.
Oh yeah, gets me going. Gets my English going.
Got to put a little English on it.
Oh yeah.
But let's move on to our last couple games. The next one is an honorable mention called Dogfight by PMC Electronics Incorporated. This came out in September of 75. We don't really have any info on it other than that it was a 2-player dogfighting game. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, is another game that I took a look at, but unfortunately didn't have a chance to play an emulated version of, called Western Gun by Taito.
Oh yeah, this is where it's at.
This one's great, and we're going to be learning more about it later too, because the North American release called Gunfight had enough differences that we felt we wanted to review it separately, and also it released a little bit later.
Mm-hmm. And then we should say the Gunfight does have emulation, so we will definitely be playing it and telling you guys about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So this was the original Japanese and I think European release of the game. It was designed by Tomohiro Nishikado, who is important because he also designed Speed Race.
Oh yeah, my man.
So Ben already loves him. And as we'll be seeing later on, went on to design Space Invaders.
This guy's he can do it all.
Yeah, he's killing it. And this one is great too, although it might not be one that has as much name recognition. So as far as looking back in the timeline could see, some of our sources told us this was the first game to show human versus human violence. I think you could technically throw the old school shootout in there, but like in that you're the human who's causing the human violence. So I don't know, because I think you're shooting at the screen in that. Mm-hmm. But I think this is the real first one that shows two sprites of humans and shooting at each other. It also had some destructible elements in it. There were cacti on the screen that when you shot at them, they would disappear, and the bullet would disappear as well. So they were kind of like limited cover that you could hide behind once, but once it was shot, you couldn't use it anymore for that round. And the controls for this were 2 different joysticks, which I feel like is pretty interesting for a 2-player game cabinet at the time. And the one that moved the cowboy character around could go in 8 different directions. And the one that you used to aim the gun could do 3 different directions, upper, middle, and lower, sort of similar to the anti-aircraft that Ben had talked about.
This one is like a top-down game, right? We should say
it is, yeah. So it's just on a solid screen and 2 cowboys kind of moving around, and the upper, middle, lower aiming it looks like works fairly well in this because you can actually move your character around as well and see where you're aiming. And another thing just generally about it before I jump into the gameplay, the cabinet art was pretty sweet for this. It's just like a desert in the background, and there's a cowboy leaning on like I think they're called hitching posts, wherever you put your horse. I don't know. I haven't played Red Dead in a while, but
that sounds right.
We'll go with that. So the gameplay for this, it's 2 players on a fixed screen, and it's basically a shootout. Your 2 cowboys, one of them has a white jacket and the other one has a black jacket, and the models are actually pretty cool for this, the sprites that they use. There's a score at the bottom of the screen, and it's 2 points per kill, and there's a timer in the middle, and each time somebody gets a kill, the round ends, and the players are respawned at their individual locations, and any of the cacti that disappeared on the screen also spawn back in, and it's just basically killing as much as you can and going through as many rounds as you can to have the most points when the timer runs out. Also, I didn't get to see this in the video I was taking a look at, but apparently each player only has 6 shots, and if they each run out of all of their ammo without killing each other, then that also ends the round, but nobody scores a point. And another interesting element to this game is that there were these little, I think they were rocks, they just like these kind of square-ish tapered mounds on the screen that the bullets would actually ricochet off of and still traveled for a bit, so you could get bounce shots off and shoot your bullet against.
So cool, dude.
Yeah. You could shoot it either off the rock, which were kind of angled on the sides, so I think it sort of would bounce off at a 45 degree or a 90 degree depending on how you shot it, but it also might be somewhat random. I couldn't really tell. But then you could also bounce them off the edges of the screen too. So definitely lots of opportunity for ricocheting your bullets off the wall. So getting straight into the ratings, because this is another one where I feel like I got to kind of go through the ratings and talk about all of the cool stuff for it to make sense as I'm talking about it. The graphics, I gave a 3.5 out of 10. There was just a lot of cool stuff in this, but the graphics themselves, or like the way it was displayed, I don't know if it was that great. So that's why I didn't bump it up to like a 4. There weren't color graphics. I saw two different. In the flyer, it looked like it was a yellowish brownish background, and on the video I saw, it looked like it was greenish. So I'm not too sure how it actually looked, but it was just sort of like a blank kind of background with slightly different colored rocks and cacti. But they did actually have different or gradient colors. It was sort of a darker green for the cactus and then a yellowish for the rocks. But part of what makes this so awesome is, one, that there was all those different elements, the rocks, the cacti, and the cowboys, but also just that the cowboy sprites themselves were like super impressive for the time. They were just like these little square rectangle dudes, but they actually had like separated legs. They had arms sticking out that sort of had like a gun formed into them. You couldn't really, didn't look like he was holding a gun, but still.
Mm-hmm.
And they had their little cowboy hats too. And the gun moved up and down, either when you changed direction to shoot or when you actually shot. I wasn't able to tell exactly, but it kind of looked like it had recoil whenever you shot the gun.
Wow.
And also the front leg, only the front leg, which is hilarious, kind of like moved in like a little jerking his knee, kind of sliding his foot movement anytime you moved up and down on the screen.
Yeah. Did you think, I haven't seen the graphics for this since I gave it to you like a week ago, but did it kind of look like a South Park character or something? I can remember them being like real squished.
A little, yeah. They're really like squat, and like on the flyer too, they don't have them drawn realistically. They're just like these little dudes with like, they're like bulky and kind of look like barrels and have no necks. So I think it was supposed to be, I mean, probably because they couldn't make it more like high definition or look better, they were like, yeah, what if we made them just look like these real silly, stout cowboys on the advertisement? Mm-hmm. So they kind of rolled with it, and it's pretty hilarious. It's good. And the other thing is that there's actually when you shoot the opponent, instead of just disappearing, the regular cowboy model disappears, and there's a black silhouette of the character on the ground and a cowboy hat sitting next to the silhouette too.
Wow.
So I know, yeah, it looks like he actually just like dropped his hat on the ground. So all that in mind, I think 3.5 is good for that, and especially when we're talking about these games in 75, that's like a pretty good graphics rating. Mm-hmm. And for the sounds, I gave it a 3 out of 10 as well. The sounds are simple in this, but I think they're all pretty well done. The gun noise is simple but good. The hit noise when you hit the opponent is a little weird because it's just like kind of like this sharp tone. Maybe it's supposed to be the guy yelling, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But it's also pretty good, and you definitely know what it is. And then there's also a different noise for when the bullet ricochets. Not so much like the modern video game ricochet noise that you hear now, but still just kind of like a boing or like a bounce noise that worked pretty well. And one of the best things is that the movement noise for the cowboys is like hilarious. It just kind of sounds like horses galloping, even though they're not riding horses.
Nice.
It's like this really fast electronic clicking. If we can, we should play a segment of that one right now.
Yeah, we'll try. And pardon us if there's like a Japanese guy talking in the background. I'll see what I can do in the editing.
And yeah, as you can hear, it's just funny, and maybe in itself it isn't funny, but when you see it with the animation, I just thought it was great. And they even used the word like comical cowboys on their flyers, so I think they knew it was funny too when they were making it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just all that together, the sounds were pretty good for this and fit the game perfectly. And for the gameplay, I gave it a 4 out of 10. I didn't actually get to play it. We'll have to see once we get to Gunfight how that pans out in a little bit different version. But it looks really fun. It's really simple in the way that you're just shooting each other. But I mean, you can aim different directions. You can bounce it off rocks. You can hide behind cacti. There's like so many different elements that would make it super fun to get competitive and play with a friend. And also, you're just shooting each other as cowboys, which like that's always going to be fun, I feel like. So for the relevance of it, I gave it a 6 out of 10. I didn't give it too much higher because I think once we get the North American version for some of the other games we're looking at, we might see maybe a little bit more relevance there. But it is basically a timed deathmatch game mode, which is something that's so core to a lot of games today. And also, it's the first game that showed human versus human violence, which, of course, is also super prevalent in games that we play today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy that something like this had at the time. And, of course, I'm doing one of those things where I'm looking at my score now. I'm like, oh, shoot, did I go a little too low? But we'll see. I could always change it when I put it up on the site.
Yeah.
And it had good animation and good sprites for the time. It was really different compared to everything else that is coming out around this time. It's
not
like
a Pong clone.
Shooting. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I was coming right off of a reviewing Knockout, which was a different Pong clone, but it was still a ball and paddle game. So I was like, oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
And so overall, I gave it a 4 out of 10. I thought it was super cool and had a lot going for it. Graphics are really well done, and even though it's not like a ton of good like colors or anything like that, it's just all the details that they added to the graphics I feel like were impactful. Like everything they added was good.
Yeah.
And the gameplay is simple, but has cool stuff like Ricochet to make it a little bit interesting and change it up a little bit. And it's a shooter game, which is just always kind of easy to get into and have fun with. So yeah, it's I mean, I blew straight through that because it looks super good. I'm excited to see what gunfights like. It's just two cowboys shooting each other. And it's not a text game, which although I do like some of the text games we played, this is like, hey, look, you can actually see it.
Yeah. I think it's definitely one of those where I do a lot of research, right? And even people who try to make their own timelines and stuff, a lot of times it'll be like Speed Race, and the next game that came out was Western Gun. Like Western Gun's always on there.
Right,
It's just got so many features on it that will impact other games and have impacted so many games. I mean, it feels like something that could be on like the NES, and you'd be like, this is a little simple, but I'm not questioning that it's not on there,
Right, yeah, it's still fun. And Taito's just been killing it recently.
Yeah. I think it'll be, maybe I'm going to have this be a little bit biased, but the special topic I'm thinking for the next episode, I'm going to kind of look at all the developers and be like, who's making the best games right now? So I think Taito is going to be definitely up there, no question, for one of the better companies doing stuff.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to get our arguments ready and start talking about who's making the good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff being made, but this is definitely one that I think people need to be aware of, just because it's so unique and different for the time. I feel like it has a lot of aspects that we've seen in a couple other games, but they all came together. We've got like basic animation and like basic colors and some like good gameplay with the projectiles and stuff. Do you know did they limit only one bullet on that you could fire at a time on this one?
As far as I could tell, they didn't. But
so you could fire like two. Yeah,
but the clip that we had available to watch to see somebody playing it, I'm not sure if
maybe they just didn't.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, because it didn't seem like super fast. So maybe it was only one at a time, and the bullets just disappeared a little faster. Because it wasn't a long period of time before they could fire next. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at that because I'm not too sure. But either way, it seemed fast-paced enough, even if you could only fire once, that maybe the bullet disappeared off the screen quick enough that you weren't waiting forever.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like compared to this to like anti-aircraft, because on that one, it's you and your buddy shooting something. But on that one, first of all, it looks a lot more crap. The graphics, they had no color. It sounded worse. And you were shooting down these objects moving in a very standard path over and over again, whereas you could be shooting your opponent who could move in any direction in this at any time. Like, it just seems like better. Like, everything about it is just better. Like, hitting off of stuff, having destructible terrain, like, there's just so much there.
I know, there's so much going on for it. It's such a good game at the time.
Yeah. So, and that one came out September of 75. It's kind of crazy that we're already 9 months into 75, but we've got probably at least 3 more episodes, I want to say, of 75. So it's gonna.
That's right. That holiday season. As always.
It's gonna really really be pumped up, and we might go even a little bit slower, I think, just because we're going to come to a lot more like interesting games too. So like once we get into the RPG land, there's like I think 5 or 6 RPGs that come out in 75, and they're all going to be in the very end here. So
and we've got to look at them. I mean,
I know. Well, we're going to want to, I think. So yeah, we might slow down a little bit, but for now, I think that was like 17 games that we covered today.
Yeah, 17 games, including the games per each console.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, what a great note to end it on with Western Gun. We talked about 2 interesting consoles with the Video Action 2 and the Odyssey 100. I mean 200. I mean they're kind of the same thing. And, anti-aircraft, which we're like, hey Atari, I don't know what you're doing this episode, but you might have to
step it up,
keep us a little bit more interested. Yeah. Knockout, which I think is a good game, but maybe not for me.
A little bit too late in its time.
A little bit too late. Yeah, would have been fantastic in 73, but yeah, and lots of other good stuff along the way. Seen some Nintendo in there doing more electromechanical.
Yep, always good to check in on them, because one of these days they'll just be like, hey, we made Mario, and you're like, what?
You're right. We know Mario's coming. We just don't know.
Yeah. But and we talked about PMC Electronics, the company that I thought would be around a little bit longer, but we're never going to see them again, Wes.
Right. Farewell, PMC. I hardly knew thee.
I know. But they were based out of Pennsylvania, so I feel like it's an extra special loss for us.
A tear for our Pennsylvania brothers, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to check us out on our website, on Twitter, on
send us
our
an email.
Yeah.
Check out our email.
And I hope you enjoyed the first game with human v human violence in today's episode. So
all right,
just wanted to say a quick little preview. Next episode, we're going to be talking about the best companies making games in 75, and also the very first dungeon crawler.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's going to be so good, Wes. I already previewed it a little bit. You're going to like it. So.
Oh, fantastic. I'm excited.
All right. We'll catch you guys in the next one.
See you guys in the next one.